Okay, thank you everybody for joining our last assembly of this year's March meeting, Tawashijat. Titled Feminist Recentering, Activism and Discourse in the Public Sphere, this session examines the evolution of feminist activism, scholarship, discursive practices, and strategies of collectivity within gender justice movements. Okay, my name is Jiwon Lee, and currently manager of the Curatorial Department here at the Sharjah Art Foundation. And it's a great honor to have two very inspirational women on stage with us today. Next to me is Aisha Bilkhair. Aisha is a writer, researcher, expert in oral history, and ethnographer. Her research holds a special interest in women and the African diaspora in the United Arab Emirates. She is currently a research advisor in the National Library and Archives. We also have Nighat Khan, feminist activist, researcher, and author. She's a founding member of Women's Action Forum in Pakistan. Women's Action Forum, or in other words, WAF, emerged as a significant feminist movement in the 1980s in response to repressive state policies introduced by military dictatorship. So today we'll first start with Nighat on her presentation, and then Aisha. And after that, we will continue with a conversation among us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to really thank the Sharjah Art Foundation for this opportunity, and also for the myriad things that it does in Sharjah. I was here a few years ago, and I was walking at that stage, running at that stage, and Hur al-Qasmi really saw that I took full advantage of the 4 days I was here. And incidentally, this is the first time I've come out again. So it's really a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure also to be with all of you, especially the tail end of this meet, that you're still here, and that's very energizing. In 2020, we had a collaborative site when Hur was actually the curator of the Lahore Art Biennale, and we had a collaborative, we meaning our NGO, had a collaborative site there with, we organized a 10-gallery exhibition. The biggest challenge was to convert an office into galleries with fake walls, etc. And what we did was that we archived 40 years of the women's history, in Pakistan. There were 3 collectives that I was working with, that I am working with, and I would like to touch on 2 of them, other than talk about Women's Action Forum, which you will see. I'm a founder of all 3 collectives, so I'm sort of very rehearsed in collectives. The Lahore, the Resource Center was formed in '83, Women's Action Forum was formed in '81, and it was called the Resource Center. By 1977, Zia-ul-Haq, a general, had taken over the country. Pakistan has had 36 years of military coup. It's been under the military directory, and then it has been there as is now. There's been a hybrid regime where the military has always been there and making all decisions. So it's been a difficult country to live in from many points of view in terms of democracy, etc. But Zia-ul-Haq, when he came in 1977, wanted to Islamize the already established Republic of Pakistan. The linchpin of his policy was women and minorities, and he made changes, radical changes in the laws, particularly the Hudud Ordinance, which was to give Islamic punishments for all the crimes that he identified. There was absolute control and lack of freedoms for women. Women were not allowed in spectator sports. the Islamic dress code was observed, was mandatory, and music, dance, theater, film, TV, development within an economic frame, but within Islamization, was allowed. So the only way we could function was through very innovative ways that we had devised to find spaces wherever we could. The Biennale itself, which I just want to give an idea of what it was, it said that Asr, which organized this Biennale, the other collective I'm part of, is the present of its past, a past in which so many part of its journey and so much who gave it passion and creativity. During the 1980s and the 1990s, when activists took their battles to the streets or otherwise tried to influence the discourse or the politics and move in more oppositional ways, other women were making their positions and expressing their resistance through their own creativities and drones. So many women supported us during that time. Extreme oppression gives rise to multifaceted creativity, since the creation of spaces becomes part of the performance. Through this exhibition, Nasser seeks to highlight the many dimensions, sought to highlight the many dimensions of the women's movement in the 80s and 90s, when poets mingled with activists, artists engaged with academics, theoreticians got support from singers, theater and dance were integrated with the grassroots, and all of them touched each other in ways that made each stronger and more determined. So basically we had 10 galleries. The galleries were again fine. We didn't have a separate gallery for art, but art was in all the galleries. We didn't have, we didn't sort of have books only in the book, but we had books in different places, and so we tried to mingle all this within a frame, and mingle it actually physically as well. I have a list of the galleries, which I won't read out. If anyone is interested, we can see it later. I have a film, a short film, well, not so short, I'm told, on Women's Action Forum. So I'd like to show it now. It's the first 10 years of Women's Forum, which I made in 1981.
For the women of Pakistan, the last 14 years have been a constant struggle against Islamization. Although they have fought every anti-woman measure with some success, they have seen a dramatic erosion of their legal and democratic rights. The state now intends to further regulate all legal, social and moral conduct under a monolithic interpretation of Islam with the passing of the Shariat bill. Women's organizations are concerned that this will be further detrimental to women. On August 6, 1989, 2 nurses were raped by 3 medical interns while on duty in a private ward in the Karachi Civil Hospital. The ensuing uproar by women's organizations resulted in the closure of the ward. As a result of the Hudud Ordinance of 1979, Farhat, one of the rape victims, found herself charged with admitting to having had sexual intercourse and with abetting the rape of the second nurse. Nafisa Hoodbhoy, an investigative journalist, was largely responsible for highlighting the case.
As a woman, I'm covering a lot of human rights issues. And rape is, of course, a violation against women, a violation of women's rights. And when I learned about how 2 nurses had been raped at gunpoint in a paying ward of Civil Hospital, I wrote about it, and then started to get involved because it wasn't just the reporting part, it was other things that I realized that needed to be done to bring the issue to the fore. As you probably know how badly it was mutilated because of the corruption we have in the judiciary, because of the corruption in the hospital administration, the police. Nevertheless, it brought to the public a very important issue, that is, nurses can get raped in hospitals. And it brought out the insecurity that working women face.
मैं जैसे ही दाखिल हुई तो दरवाजे के पीछे दो लड़के छुपे हुए थे। उन्होंने एकदम दरवाज़ा बंद कर दिया और एक ने तो मेरा मुंह दबा दिया। तो ज़ाहिर है एक लड़की क्या कर सकती है, जब दो इतने आदमी हों तो कुछ भी नहीं कर सकती मैं। दम से मेरा मुंह बंद कर दिया और रिवॉल्वर मेरे कनपट्टी पे रखे और बोले कि अगर शोर मचाया तो तुम्हें मार देंगे हम इधर ही, और चुप कर जाओ, और मुंह बांध दिया मेरा कपड़े से और एक ने हाथ पकड़ लिए और फिर दूसरे ने पकड़े, ऐसे दोनों ने मेरे साथ की।
कभी ये को आपके ऊपर बात पड़ जाए आपके बच्चों के ऊपर तो आपको पता चलेगा कि मुसीबत क्या चीज़ होती है। ये तो हम जानते हैं, रातों जागे हैं, पुलिस की ठोकरें खाई हैं, जेल में चली गई मेरी बच्ची, क्या कम मुसीबतें हैं? मंगनी छूट गई मेरी बच्ची की, ना कम मुसीबतें हैं।
इसका आपकी ज़िंदगी पे क्या असर पड़ा है?
असर पड़ा वो तो मैं ही जानती हूँ ना, और तो कोई नहीं जानता कि मेरे अंदर। बज़ाहिर तो मैं ठीक रहती हूँ, लेकिन अंदरूनी तौर पे तो मैं बिल्कुल ही एक किस्म का ना होने के बराबर ही है।
Despite immense risks, countless women continue to work and fight the many injustices in Pakistani society. The case is still in court. It may end with Farhat going to jail, while the alleged rapists may go free. The mobilization around this case by several women's organizations, particularly the Nurses Action Committee, led to a huge demonstration which brought out women's organizations from the whole political spectrum. Serious differences between them led to a rift, with the Islamic fundamentalist women separating themselves from the others.
जिस वक्त ये फरहत का केस सामने आया तो कई जगहों से ये इत्तला पहुंची कि कोई मुजाहरा है वहाँ आप ज़रूर आइए। हमने अपना ताउन का दस्ते ताउन बढ़ाया और हम लोग उसमें शामिल हुए, लेकिन वहाँ जाकर जब वहाँ पर प्ले कार्ड्स उठाए गए और उसमें हुदूद ऑर्डिनेंस के खिलाफ नारे वगैरह बुलंद होने शुरू हुए तो हमने अपना रास्ता अलग इख्तियार कर लिया।
We didn't feel that we could isolate this case from the overall issue of hudud, which was the Islamic laws brought in by General Zia-ul-Haq, that we couldn't just take a short-term action on a rape unless one saw it in the larger context of what Islamization had done to this country, about what it had done to society.
1977 was a turning point for Pakistan. General Zia-ul-Haq imposed martial law, justifying his takeover by saying that he had to Islamize the already Islamic Republic of Pakistan. He was supported by right-wing fundamentalist parties, including the Jamaat-e-Islami, none of whom have ever been elected by a popular vote. In one deft move, the military, the mosque, and money colluded to regiment society, erase diversity, and drive women into obscurity. Almost immediately, the government insisted that women observe the Islamic dress code.
I think the state was trying to enter our lives and our homes, and it was taking over our space, it was taking over our bodies, it was taking over our minds, it was taking up our sheer presence. You know, just the presence of women had suddenly become a question for debate, which it had never been previous to this.
There are some restrictions on dress which, according to the understanding of Islam has put on the woman.
What restrictions are those specifically?
that in our Islamic world we call satar, that women has to conceal their full body except their eyes and face and hands. With that restriction, they can go wherever they like, they can do whatever they do, they can do any job.
Eyes and face.
Yes.
So why is the burqa and the hijab so important if the face can be uncovered?
No, there are two views about face. Some ulama think that the face comes under satar, the others ulama say that face doesn't come under satar. But even the face doesn't come under satar, only eyes, women can do with their eyes all the things. There is no restriction on that. There is no bar on that.
देखिए अमेरिका की ज़िंदगी में मैंने उस आज़ादी के अंदर जो कैद महसूस की वो इस कैद के अंदर मैं उससे बहुत ज़्यादा आज़ादी महसूस करती हूँ क्योंकि वहाँ पर मेरा पूरा इन्हिसार जो था और मेरी पूरी शख्सियत जो थी अपने शौहर के मरकज़ के गिर्द घूमती थी। मैं मिसिज़ नईम और जहाँ बुलाई जा रही हूँ मिसिज़ नईम के तौर पर और जहाँ जा रहे हैं फॉर्मली पहले से बताकर और जो भी चीज़ है मुझे ऐसा लगता था कि उस आज़ादी के अंदर मेरी तमाम आज़ादी बल्कि छिन रही है और यहाँ आने के बाद इस हिजाब के बाद मैं ऐसा महसूस करती हूँ कि मैं दोबारा से आज़ाद हो गई हूँ।
The Hudud Ordinance was passed in 1979. It specifies Islamic punishments and makes no distinction between rape, adultery or fornication. The enormity of the implications became evident in 1981 when a woman and a man were arrested for fornication, sentenced to 100 lashes each and stoning to death. Women began fighting back. Several organizations came together as the Women's Action Forum.
There was a deathly silence everywhere with censorship of the press. There was no way of really communicating this growing movement and its concerns. So initially, women made use of a lot of material. We published posters, we made cassettes, we sang songs, we mobilized in small groups, and we did manage to get through some of these things into the press, but it was a very heavily censored press to begin with.
The proposed law of evidence stipulates that in cases not covered by the Hudud Ordinance, the evidence of 2 women would be equal to that of 1 man. Women's Action Forum was outraged and immediately tried to mobilize against it. This culminated in a public demonstration by several women's organizations on February 12, 1983.
This is the very first demonstration against martial law. That nobody had had the courage to come out and defy, the state forces, but nobody. And it was a sort of the first sort of sign of emancipation, the first effort to break through this silence. And I think that this has been a turning point not only for the women's movement in Pakistan, but really for the revival of democracy and democratic institutions in Pakistan.
After 1983, women's resistance intensified and became more public, especially on the issue of violence against women. Simultaneously, there was a continuous agitation against Islamization, now becoming more explicit. The next major legal issue was General Zia-ul-Haq's attempt to introduce the Shariat Bill in 1988. But years of mobilization of the women's movement had forced the women's issue onto the national agenda. The bill, when it was passed in 1991, was in a diluted form, but especially for women, no less ominous.
It is a struggle for us to try and explain to people that in fact the implications of what is being passed today are going to be no less damaging. I mean, in a sense, we're reliving 1979 and what happened with the Hudud Ordinance, that it wasn't till 81 that we were clear on what the implications were. And again, the Shariat Bill, I fear that the same is going to happen, that when the implications, and I mean, it's already happening, I mean, all these, the special courts, I mean, the 12th Amendment, the 8th Amendment, we indemnify everything, the state dilutes it, the government dilutes it, and our struggle therefore becomes much more difficult. This is another reason why we've not been able to move forward, because we're always trying to explain that what the intentions of the state and the government are it works very insidiously. And to explain to people takes a long time. And so you asked me about the future of WAF. I really don't know, because I think that people have to wise up to the games that are being played. And until that happens, WAF is likely to still be fighting on this turf.
I think that what women did achieve, or what little women did achieve with regard to the law of evidence and the resistance to other laws anti-women and discriminatory towards women but enforced in the name of Islam, was not achieved because of their having propounded a better or more advantageous interpretation of Islamic law.
I think the question that really has to be asked is not whether WAF should work within the framework of Islam or outside the framework of Islam, but whether or not the actions and strategies and positions taken by the women's movement and WF specifically empower women or not.
If you keep saying that we have to justify our demands on the basis of Islam, then what you are saying, in fact, is that if somebody is able to prove that Islam does not give us those rights, then we are willing to let go of those rights. This position WAF has never taken. WAF is very clear about the rights that they want, the demands that they are making, and they are very clear on the position that we are entitled to them.
I think, well, WF is trying to work out a strategy. I'm not sure whether it will evolve a consensus on this. I do believe that we live in a cultural framework which is Muslim, and just as the various faces of patriarchy are culturally different in different environments, I do believe the responses are also culturally different.
I don't think that Islam is the basis of identification between the people in Pakistan. We have our own ethnic identities, and that is the basic reason why Bangladesh came into existence. If Islam was the identity or common identity, that would not have happened. Islam has time and again proved to be a very tenuous bond for people within Pakistan. For instance, I myself would feel more of an affinity with people from East Punjab living across the border than to somebody from Saudi Arabia.
In a country of such ideological, cultural and class diversity, the women's movement and its responses will necessarily reflect this. However, while women confront their different realities and forms of oppression, and while they continue to debate the issues, the women's movement has found its place in history.
Women's Action Forum was started in 1951 during the time of Zia-ul-Haq. The general took over, and he was the one who assassinated Prime Minister Bhutto. He said that he justified his takeover, military takeover, because he said, I need to bring Islam into this culture. That is my mission, that's what I need to do. What he did first was take away women's rights, intensity, to get to that, I'll get to WAF first. WAF is open to all members of the Charter. It is a total collective and works across 6 cities so far, 6 cities around the country. It has grown considerably. The more WAFs are under 14 of us, very active members. Within 2 years, in 1983, we became 76 members of the collective. It is definitely a collective. It is non-hierarchical. No funds are generated, no funds, counting funds from donors, from the UN, from business. Can't even take funds from its own members beyond a certain point, because we think that member would get privileged. The more well-to-do members would get privileged in terms of their funding. It has no paid employee, no office, no address, and is not registered. So we are absolutely free. And many times the government has tried to ban us, but we can't be legally banned because we don't exist. We took a case once against the government where it was going to privatize the Women's Bank. We have a Women's Bank for women. And when we went to court, the court wanted us to prove our bona fide. We had no reason. We weren't either owners or lenders or borrowers or anything, so we had to prove our bona fide. Nevertheless, we were able to get that case through, and we won that case at the High Court level. We have to make our positions and our policies across all 6 chapters. First, we make them within our own chapter, then it goes to the other chapters, and the other chapters have to agree with their own chapters to come to a policy decision. So it can actually meet once a year or tries to meet once a year in a convention which is out-of-pocket expenses from the members, or they may raise some from other well-to-do members, but by and large, nobody pays for it, but yet we try and come together. We meet in self-funded, as I said. The other thing is that members must internalize the principles and positions. This takes a long time. The little debate that you saw at the end of the film, where 2 members of Lahore WAF are arguing whether we should work within the framework of Islam or not. There was a whole move that because of the state, because of the nature of the state, and especially because in Pakistan, to say secular means you're an atheist. So do we call ourselves a secular organization under the threat that we would be atheists? And being an atheist is illegal in the country. Changing your religion is illegal in this country. For a Muslim, changing their religion is a crime. For a non-Muslim to become a Muslim is fine. You go to heaven. So it's a tricky one. But WAF, after this one debate, had a national convention within 2 months of this debate and actually voted to take the risk, to be honest to itself, and to call itself a secular organization. It has been a secular organization since. We have received flack for it, especially from right-wing fundamentalist groups, but it so far continues to exist and continues to call itself secular. The members of WAF across the country are diverse, and all women's takes the position that all its concerns are women's concerns, be it race all oppressions, be it race, be it caste, be it ethnicity, be it, and both at the global and national level. So, for example, it has very strong positions on global issues. These days, of course, very strong on Palestine. It issues statements, it issues support, it's in touch with some Palestinians, it tries to give moral support, not much else we can do, but enormous concern. As I said, it takes the issues that all are women's issues. Women's Action Forum is involved since this demonstration, in demonstrations and protests, making statements, legal cases up to the Supreme Court, and it takes legal cases for individual women. By and large, these individual women have suffered harassment, violence, etc., and it takes those cases, it supports those women. Anyone, not just harassment, rape is a major issue that we take up. We take it up at many levels, unlike some other organizations that are very active in Pakistan. But we take the position that not only will we be concerned about this individual woman, but we will be concerned about the laws that enable these things and then the implementation of those laws. So we try to go both the essence of feminist politics, which is, and incidentally we use the words of feminism. We call ourselves a feminist organization, which in itself is anathema to both the right and the left. Marxists also have a problem with feminism. They'd much rather us be part of their Marxist parties and get active there. They're not very happy that we have a separate, more important, more public entity or forum, and we've had a lot of criticism and a lot of tension with the right, not the right, definitely, but the left-right, what we call the Marxists, the hardcore Marxists. Progressive men also. Recently there was an incident where we had a Aurat March, which is on the 8th of March, and one woman came out, a young woman, came out with a slogan and a banner basically saying, "My body is my right." But in Urdu, it becomes, "Mera jism, meri marzi." My right, my body, my right, becomes sort of, has a sexual connotation to it. So I can do with my body, it is my right. So the public took it sexually, and the right took it sexually. So the following year, I had a placard which said, "My body, your right. Are you happy now?" And that was criticized, including on media, saying I was being satirical and sarcastic, which I was. And one of our most progressive media anchors said that. So I said, it's really got to him, because I'm saying that, is it your right? And it's, so all issues we say are women's issues, and I'll sort of end there a bit before I wind it up, because I'm hoping we'll get some questions, etc. When we say that all issues are women's issues, apart from Palestine today, but we tried, and we're different from the other organizations, is that whereas we take local issues, we try and go to lobbying, advocacy, changes in the laws, and then seeing the laws are implemented. Now, some of the changes in the laws require us to go to the Supreme Court. And we're the only organization that actually goes to the Supreme Court. We have 4 cases in the Supreme Court at the moment. One is that the Women's Bank, which is for poor women, is again being nationalized because it happens to be a very lucrative bank. And we won it at the High Court level, but it's gone to the Supreme Court. Incidentally, the owner, the person who's bought the court, is from the UAE. So we are particularly concerned about the UAE at the moment and how it has so much money that it can come buy up our banks. And but it's Dubai. Don't worry about it. So it's we have one there. We have another law where we say that the Supreme Court justices should not be absolved of their decisions while they're Supreme Court justices. We have an entity above them called the Supreme Judicial Review. So we say that they should, whether they're retired or not, if they've made such a decision that has been detrimental to society as a large or to an individual, they should still be liable to be called in front of the Judicial Council. The other that we have in court is on transsexuals. We've been supportive of the LGBTQI community, but the transsexuals, the law that we have in Pakistan is actually a progressive law compared to other countries, especially in the Muslim world. And we have had a long engagement to get it to that point. But now the Federal Sharia Court, which is an Islamic court, has said that you can't have transsexuals without them going through physical examinations, psychological examinations, and whether they have genetic problems or problems at birth. In other words, problems with their sexual organs. In our law, for the moment, it's self-definition. If you want to define yourself, if you feel that you're a man or a woman, if you feel that you're both, then you can actually, legally, your position is okay. They have said that no, it's not possible for you to do this self-definition. You have to decide whether you're a man or a woman, and you can't decide. Doctors and therapists, etc., have to decide whether you are or not a woman. We are in the Supreme Court challenging that decision. The other one that we're challenging is that the military and the government have said that it will charge civilians under we tried civilians under martial law. In other words, civilians can be court-martialed. So we have gone to court saying that civilians cannot be court-martialed. We have our superior courts, we have a legal system very much like the British, and there's no reason for you, and the death penalty can be either way. You can get death penalty for treason in the civilian courts, you can get death penalty in martial law. But why should martial law does not allow, martial courts do not allow witnesses, they do not allow public hearings, they don't allow the lawyers that you want. So we're saying, why did this? In other words, what I want to say is that when we look at feminism, to me and to Women's Action Forum, feminism is not only a wide spectrum within a certain frame of feminist frame, but it necessarily means that you must be talking about other oppressions. You cannot really be a feminist without being a socialist. You can't be a feminist while you're a fascist. You can't be a feminist. I was just thinking fascist. I know a lot of women. I'm in touch with women, I've heard about women in Israel whom I would say are fascist feminists because they're actually agreeing and supporting and giving wild stories about what's happening in Gaza, and they are part of that, and yet they're calling themselves feminists. So I find that absolutely obnoxious. So I think that you need to be worried about race, for example, is very important to the feminist movement. Ethnicity in our country, we're made up of ethnic people. I think we have our ethnic identities, and we don't think that one ethnicity should be dominant on the other. For us, that is an equal issue for the feminist movement. So I would say feminism is national, is local, national, and global, and therefore must look at other countries, must look at what is happening to the world must be responsible for that part of the world. But at the same time, within the country, as Women's Action Forum tries to do, that it must include rural women, it must be from other areas of Pakistan, other ethnicities of Pakistan, despite contradictions, despite problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nighat, for the presentation. Maybe we can first move on to Aisha's, so we can, before we move on to the discussion.
Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to thank Sharjah Art Foundation for this opportunity and for really making the city on its tipping toes in terms of the eclectic and stimulating, intellectually stimulating conversations we have been listening to over the past 3 days. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Let me warn you that I'm one of, when I was 8, I asked my mom why blood is red. So be prepared for what you're gonna see. It's based on all the crazy questions. It's based also on me digging and reading between the lines and always not satisfied with the answer of yes or no. Because there is a maybe and there are gray areas that need to be defined too. Today I'm just gonna go and talk about women of the UAE, who we are. We know we wear shayla and abaya, we tall and short, and we come in different colors, but who really we are. We come from a high context culture where we think of a we. Even when we speak about ourselves in terms of I, we always say, I repent, astaghfirullah, a'udhu billah min kalmat ana. So we always negate ourselves because we live in a collective. And we always think about the others, what would the other think of us? So with that in mind, we always like to always have a relationship with something to really build on that relationship. So the number of, let me go back because I believe everything has roots and we have to go back to our roots to dig, like I said, and answer the unanswered questions. 4 months and 10 days is the number of days women mourn when their husband die. And it's the same number of days men spend at sea when they used to go to dive. What is the relation? Well, we think about numerology. And yes, it is really that the season offers itself to 4 months and 10 days. The irony of this place we live in had switched the pearl banks into oil fields. It's amazing how we moved from one crop to another. So there is a bless in that too. My story starts here because I live in Shandagha in Dubai, and during the off-season, my father used to enter the sea, and during the off-season, I used to go with the people going back to the desert. And during this time, we hear lots of dormitories, they recite poetry, they live a different life I was always interested in, between the sea that is fluid, that brought us music from Africa, brought us dates from Iraq, brought us different things from all over the place, magazines from Egypt, to the desert where it's really harsh. And I thought about why do we in the desert have to live in a collective that's all about survival. So I could be one of these children when we go, of course, from Dubai to the outskirts of, let's say, Al-Faqr. This is how, as children, we always listen to all of this. And we walk barefoot. We breathe all the clean air. So our minds are always within the nature that we live in. It is fascinating when we see in this hunting and gathering society of the desert that men always go hunt in the morning. And what always amazed me is the fact that there is a relationship between the animal and the humans in terms of there is a complex relationship that this Bedouin in the desert can train a bird to go and fly and fetch something for them. That communication itself needs to be looked at. And then added to that, a dog. So a dog and a bird go fetch the things for you. But where are women of all of this? This is the setting of eating. Women come in the household where from the morning to the evening, the work is divided. And of course, in gathering, people always get the emotional intelligence because they learn how to speak. They say there is mizan al-kalam, which is you weigh everything you say because you don't want to say, I am sorry. You always say the right thing once and once only. You would believe that we have coffee that is served is also, it gives us an adjective of generosity, both in the desert and in the coastal line, and for people who live in the coast. There are 95 etiquettes of drinking coffee, and women, here we talk about women now, have always been using everything resourcefully to make homes, to make things to eat on, to make furniture for the house. They're the ones who do the sadu. It's an art form, of course, and got to UNESCO. Women had always been part of their history and part of ours. They always sing as they do these things. So they create also art that makes life easy for them. This is Dag al-Hab, and after maybe a week, we're going to have Ramadan, where they eat this specific meat with a dish made by meat and barley. They used to pound it, and they used to sing about it. This art form had vanished, and we try now to bring it back because women had to be part of it too. Now, this is the pharmacy of the desert, where lots of things happening. We didn't have, let's say in the 1950s, the very first hospital happened. Women used to remember exactly which medicine is good for what disease. And they used to pound it and mix it. And usually it is hulul and khil, because they think the stomach is the center of your body, so they have to feed you these two things. One is a laxative and one is an antibiotic. Kids used to think it's really hard. It's very bitter to drink all of this. So they bring those herbs and spices to the camel, and then they milk the camel, and they give them the milk already incorporated in the milk as a medicine to the children. All of this to say that women had been always thinking about not only themselves, but the community, the collective memory that is made in the community. The women take care of it, whether it's through medication or through different, even hardship. During 1935, we have a smallpox problem, pandemic. Women were the ones who took care of men that they used to be buried in sand holes they call madha, and it is women who used to go and nurse them and take care of them. So culturally now, I'm going to talk about how this culture respects women and how we didn't have to go through what other countries have gone through in terms of feminism, if you will, fighting for their rights. Since childhood, kids, especially girls, are always asked to go and spot what ship is coming. In the desert, they ask them to go and spot the month of Ramadan. If two girls have said, we've seen the crescent of Ramadan, they will start the month. So this is a huge, huge respect that people have handed to the hands of girls, because they have, number one, to develop a sharp vision to see their neighborhood and be aware of their surroundings. And number two, they put in their hands their very element of the core element of their religion. Women had always been the solution and not the problem. When a problem happened between two tribes, it is intermarriages that sometimes dissolve the issues, because when the intermarriages happen and children are born, they always, the blood is, the people don't revenge for that. And the funny thing is we collect oral histories, and when we collect them, they always tell us that when women, this is how they empower some women to this limit. They tell her, you go, and usually it's very expensive, so what would the husband give his wife? Something like this. This is her dowry. So they tell her, if the husband's family treat you ill, just cut this and come to us. It's very easy. Don't subject yourself to abuse. They made it very easy for her. So what women used to do is, she will go, maybe she's married to somebody, the enemy of her family, so she make a problem with her husband for her to send her home, and then she'll tell them what they're plotting, and she'll tell them all the news. Women were really smart in that regard as well. So they practiced mental toughness, and they were really tough. Another thing is, as girls, we always asked to go and play, especially on a swing. Because on a swing, we sing lots of yammi, yammi, yammaya, ra'il bahar maba. As a child, this memory stays in our memory, and then when we get our children, lullabies come from these songs that we have stored in our memory. When we go and we make buttermilk and we shake the containers, we also, the same motion brings back those memories. Now, water is very important in the desert. So lots of, when we wake up in the desert, like I told you, I used to go during the summer holiday. In the desert, they fetch water. Women will go and fetch water, and men are not allowed to cross the footprint of women. If a man is lost in the desert, he is not to cross her footprint, because this will really cause a problem in terms of her chastity and her reputation. If that happened, they bring the forensic team, and they can tell exactly what time they met and what took place, because they can see the motions of the feet and all of that stuff. Now, my question is, if women of the desert for many, many, many years, their footprint is respected in a place where nobody walks, what do you think in her presence? How strong is her presence? Of course it is, because that's why they had even an idiomatic expression saying, consult a woman, but then do the opposite. شاورها وخالفها. It's an oxymoron when you think about it. Why do I have to consult her? The idea is for you to hear her opinion. It could be the right opinion, but the final decision is yours. So women's opinion was heard all the time. We gathered this information from the orally transmitted knowledge that we have and we are yet to recommend, because as children, we didn't have maids that go behind us to see where we are, but we have to be aware of, is there a scarab, is there a reptilian, is there a snake? So we have to always be aware of everything in the desert. And that's very important, because they need to know also if there is a camel that runs away, they need to know how far is the camel have gone and how can they bring the camel back. I say this because in the heart of Europe, when do you think women got their right to vote in Switzerland? What year? Anybody? Close. 71. Thank you. In the heart of Europe, 1971, women got the right to vote. And then stereotypes come back to us is that we are backwards in terms of how we respect women, when a woman's footprint in the desert is respected. That's why we need to really talk about how women specifically in the UAE is looked at. Women who went and studied abroad, whether they accompanied their families or not, came back and they established schools in their own homes teaching young children from 1907 till 1953, when the systematic education started, and the very first school started not far from where we are here in Sharjah. Then we got Sheikh Zayed, the founding father, who asked women to go in a program that is to erase illiteracy. I interviewed a lady who came from Bahrain, and she was a teacher. Sheikh Zayed told her, teach them from 0 to 9. Just that's their curriculum. So 5 women in the neighborhood came to this school, and he taught them from 0 to 9. And then he told her also, add to this curriculum how to write their names. She said, okay. So 5 women came to the class, and they started learning how to write a number from 0 to 9 and how to sign their name. Later on, Sheikh Zayed introduced the phone, which requires them to dial from 0 to 9. And he asked them, I didn't bring it, then he asked them to sign their own name, because women used to ask their brother or somebody else to be their representative in court. So that's empowering women at its best. Then, of course, this is like the bus I went to school to. After the establishment of the UAE in 1971, the literacy mandate started. I remember my mother and my father went to school learning how to read and write in the 70s. And they went till the 5th grade because they started writing in Arabic and reading Quran, and they were really happy. And then in the 5th grade, the Big Bang, they told them English will be part of your curriculum. So my mom said, first they teach us how to write from right to left, and now we're gonna go reverse. I'm not gonna be in this school anymore. So she quit. But she quit very happy that she is able to read and write. It is our mothers that made the difference in our lives. That generation were the accelerators, because we did not miss one day of school. The minute they felt the taste of education and their ability that they can read what's in front of them, whether that's a magazine or a legal paper or anything else, they felt empowered, and they didn't want to deprive us of that. So they were really the accelerators. They shared the responsibility of education, and they used to accompany us. It's the same school, exactly like this school we're in now. In the morning, it's a school for us, and in the evening, it's a school for our parents. I like this quote by Sophia Loren, that once you're a woman, once you're a mother, you're always thinking for yourself and for your child. And in here, we are always other mothers. And as women, we always, this example of women being an accelerators, really, it's lift as we climb, because nobody was left behind. Everybody pulled everybody else. And to this day, the support we get from our sisters is what is keeping us going forward. Now we come back to history, and this is from the 70s again, from my generation. Sheikh Zayed, the founding father, used to go to schools like this when they graduate, when they have special events. They always walk the talk. They always encourage education. They always support children, even in in 1976, the University of Al Ain started opening. And of course, the main problem or the main challenge women faced at that time is for them to leave the house without being escorted by their brother or protected by members of their family. They had to have a chaperone. So what Sheikh Fatima, Allah yahfadha, mother of the Emirates, and also Sheikh Zayed did, they made a mechanism by which they enabled families to allow their daughters to go beyond the household to be educated. The school is in Al Ain, the university is in Al Ain, so the buses had tinted glass. You need to really restore, you get the trust of the people that you lead. So they secured that there is a chaperone in the car, in the bus. The glass is tinted, nobody can see the girls. The campus had has high walls. There is curfew, and they're going to be paid the salary for attending school. Their food and everything was free. And in addition to that, they brought their own children to endorse this. So if the leader of the country is sending, and the royal family and other prominent members of society is endorsing education to this level, everybody allowed their daughter to go. So that was, you walk the talk, and that's how they did. We see in Abu Dhabi the respect for women and elsewhere, but this is not far from where I live in Abu Dhabi. They had specific places for women to practice their privacy, even on the beach when they go. We see them everywhere, our grandmothers and our sisters, they're everywhere. They feel empowered because there is no sticky floor, nor there is a glass ceiling. We don't have to deal with that. Our culture enabled women to really live the life that they live without, their issues are like sugar in the water. And then we see them now, they're everywhere. We see them in not far from where we are here on heart of Sharjah. They're active. Women are really active. They're entrepreneurs. Her husband is maybe she's divorced or maybe widow, but she doesn't feel she's a victim. She's cooking and selling what she cooks. She's an entrepreneur. She doesn't wait for people to support her. She supports herself, and she's independent, and she have raised her children and focused on the culture that she grew up. Women, we see them, like I said, they are the solution and not the problem. They had always been part of everything that we see everywhere. They even now inventing new food to overcome the rising cases of diseases such as cancer. And yes, they are this is in the 2015, commercial election, they were also active members of that. And they are moving toward the future. They're not sitting there. We see them very active in the social media. Lots of women are really, they have their own accounts, and they're very active on them, and they're always posting things. We see women naturally, 34% of the Mars mission is made out of women. And they are very innovative, as you can see. All of that comes from the top of the pyramid to everybody in culture and society, proud of their mothers, of their sisters. And that's an example that we see as soft power. We like it to be really positive and to go above and beyond to where we are, because the children you see in this picture during COVID, their memory of, they're there in the decision-making place, they're there, they're listening, they're absorbing information. They will carry us to the future with wisdom. And women, they always respected, and they always everywhere, from ministers to in the military to their faces everywhere that you see. Even in the future, we're going to see them even on Mars and on the moon And we have also the UAE Gender Balance Council. And like I said, there's no difference even in pay. And now they have maternity leave for fathers. Fathers leave even when the children are born or when, so most of the issues are solved in that regard. And NFC, which is our parliament, 50-50, 50 members of it are men and 50 is women. So there is equality there. And yes, we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you both, Nighat and Aisha, for your presentations. I think circling the main concept of feminism, I think we brought in very different perspectives from different directions. Yours more about education, history, and tradition, and Nighat, yours about struggles of women against violence and state oppression. And I think it will be very interesting to find where we share our common factors. And I think first for Nighat, I have a question for you. Whenever you introduced Women as Action Forum, you always mention it's non-funded and non-registered. And you kind of explained to us that it is because it makes the organization free. So it not having a formal organizational structure really gives it flexibility and also gives it a certain independence from any external agendas. And also then it really relies on the interdependence between the women within the group to actually take, and self-organization and initiatives to take the group's actions forward. So while I also really see the advantages of this kind of formation, because we are here today to really talk about what is collectivity, how do we really form collectivism, I also want to hear about what kind of challenges you had by taking this type of organizational structure and how you kind of dealt with those issues. You mentioned there were in chapters, you had different chapters in the Women's Action Forum, but I'm also sure there was a lot of conversations because at the end it was a group of individuals.
Well, we have 6 chapters, but we have members who have come and gone. So the other day, in one of our conventions, we have a national convention. We were recalling how many women, we were very surprised when women say we're members of WAF. We didn't realize. And then and founders also, so that's sort of, it's become like a badge to wear. And we found that we had thousands of members across the country. Which is not true, probably 2 or 3 active members. But I think that coming to the initial part of the question, in terms of funding and in terms of funding would actually restrict us. The funding itself has become much more restrictive. And it has become very donor thematic. You know, we keep saying that this year's fashion is this, and this year's fashion is that, and this year's fashion is that. And it's a whole steady thing of donor reports and donor reporting and meetings, etc. And I don't think Women's Action Forum would be able to function that way because it's an open forum. And I think that the difficulty, the challenges today are that there are challenges, etc. Before, we used to, when we started, we couldn't communicate with each other. Many of us didn't have cars at that time. We were all university teachers, or many of us were university teachers. We didn't have phones. There was a phone in the house, but it wasn't with you, etc. And you got your turn with the phone in the house. And yet, we were meeting almost every day. We were meeting much more. The first few years, was very active. Now what we do is we use the internet. If I have an idea now, if I think of an idea now that this event took place, and I'm very, very impressed that so much of it was on Palestine, and I know that it would be of interest. And if I just write this one sentence and write a paragraph and say we need a position on this, by a day or so later, we will have a position on this, if they agree. So the social media has helped us do things very fast. It also is much more inclusive because we have a WhatsApp group with all the members in it. And we do have a quorum that if that many members say yes, endorse it, and we don't give much time, by tomorrow morning, that many members, but we have to go through stages. We go through the chapter itself, the chapter you're a member of. So tonight I could write about something at this conference. And then by the time it goes to the National Committee, it'll be in the morning. And then we give them a day to give their response. They will send it out to their members. And by tomorrow evening, we will have a response, which means we can have a Twitter thing on it, we can have Instagram, we can have Facebook, we can have whatever. So it's actually much easier for us to be in touch. So much so that we used to have national conferences once a year, but we haven't had one, we don't have that so frequently because these national issues get resolved along the way. It also means that it's not so expensive. Conventions are held with your own money. The city that is hosting it has to raise money or put together money to host it, keep that many people, feed them, etc. And the people who are coming, the members coming, have to pay their own way. So it's actually totally cost-free. But with even trains and cars and buses becoming as expensive, flights are out of the question. They're just too expensive. But those who can get, and trains are fun because 20 can come or 15 can come together, etc. If you have the time, you should make the time. Even our buses are very good across the country. You can all come in a bus, but you still need to have that time. You need a week to come, spend time, and go back. And people are very busy these days, much busier than we were. Things are much faster. So we don't take money for these reasons. We don't make money because we will get dependent. We will have to frame ourselves. We will constantly have to worry. And all donors require a hierarchy. They'll say, who's your director? Who's your accountant? Do they have an MBA? Do they have whatever? Do they have this? Do they have that? What experience do they have? Who's in control? We just, even us, this group I was going to talk about, decided to close down because we have people there who worked for the organization for 25 years and they're suddenly asking for a degree. They know their job very well, but they don't have the degree. I mean, the accountant doesn't have the degree, but he handles his account. So this is, it's very restrictive, and it's restrictive much more in terms of the type of things we do in Women's Action Forum, no donor would accept. No donor would support it. So we have that freedom. And we have the moving offices, moving the meetings from places so that no member gets identified as the leader of WAF.
So, also the activities of WAF include also going to the Supreme Court, legislation and policy making, which sometimes you, at the end, have to come up with a common one strategy to get things to that stage. And with the collective formation, there may be different opinions on how to strategize. And so this type of, even though communication is easier, maybe sometimes that is actually...
It takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. A lot of people can speak on the issue, takes a lot of time, but as I mentioned earlier, it took us 10 years to call ourselves secular. Many of us were taking that position from the time it started. Some didn't agree till everybody agreed. Everybody has to agree to something so crucial as to call yourself a secular organization. In Pakistan, it was very crucial and very dangerous. And I might add that Women's Action Forum members have been to jail, they've been arrested, they've been, house arrest, etc. So it's actually not, you can't really ask people to take too much risk. Nowadays, we're taking less risks because the spaces are getting narrower and narrower, what we call shrinking spaces. And people are disappearing, and many things are going on. So we're not asking, even when we had our demo, we had mobilized a lot of sex workers and women from the community. And we made it very clear that only those women should come on this demo if they can get themselves out of jail. If they have contacts and they know people, because we will be able to get them out of jail, we'll probably be in jail ourselves. So it was really, it was often called a very elite demo. And it was, because even during the demo, for instance, the sex workers, we asked them to leave, because we thought the first people they will get, the first ones they will arrest, will be the sex workers.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Aisha, I would like to now ask you a question. So one of your main research methods is oral history. And oral histories is a very personal and individual thing. It's collecting stories, memories, evidences, experiences from individual people. So I believe you will be meeting a great large spectrum of people with all very diverse memories. Yes. And from that, how do you analyze? It's very microscopic what you do. Then how do you make a macro analysis of, let's say, the women's condition? And when we're talking about the women in the UAE, how do you translate all those different individual experiences into something that we may call history?
Thank you for this technical question. I will start by saying something like this. When we were kids, anything I call my brother, he will do this, which means it goes back to you. So to this day, it's a U-turn like that. So there are stories made in so many different ways. And it's very interesting that we gather stories about the nation and the nation building. And we see what people, you may have noticed the UAE people they don't indulge in music. They're not physically, they don't dance, they don't exhibit that as much as other nations. And I think their focus was on survival, their focus was on day-to-day activities. So how do we gauge that, and how we understand it is we gather their information, and their information is whatever they can volunteer to tell us about the neighborhood where they lived, how do they celebrate death, how do they celebrate life, how do they celebrate day-to-day interactions and activities. And within that, we see the time frame, we see what's going on in terms of economics, what's going on in terms of politics, what's going on, what other things may came from outside that influence. So we read things and analyze them within the environments or the specificities of the societies that we look at. For example, I found myself asking somebody in the desert about the decoy egg that the chicken have to sit on the rest of the eggs to help the other eggs hatch. They call it a decoy egg. نحن نسميها البيضة الرامي. So I asked about that. People in the Western province, they don't have that because they're Bedouin, they're moving from one place to another. So that terminology is not part of their culture or part of what they do in their daily activities. So every cluster had its own specific issues and areas, and we try to always ask them what had been passed on from their grandmothers to them, what is a practice that they think it's still going on, what the practice they think it is threatened, what do they think it's going to vanish for the next generation. So these are the things that we try to ask, and we also ask them, give me an advice for the next generation. With that, they put their value, they put what they think they had that now lacking. It's a loaded question, and it gives us lots of information as to what is important to people and what are they comparing and what is the issue that we need to address or bring back or discuss more for yet to come interviews. And it's very interesting that we sit with the older generation, and they take us back in time and space. And it's really nice to relive all of this, the buildings we have, but the memory that came to the walls of these places. They speak it, they smell, they describe the smell, the heat. They describe things that you can imagine. The spice, they can eat something and they tell us what is the makeup of this dish or what they see. Because I think they come from time when their memory was blank. They even tell us, we interviewed a lady who does massage, and she said, my touch is not the same anymore because my phone is shaking if it's on a certain mode. I touch the car door, I touch things, so I lost that sensitive touch to feel the veins and to feel where I need to press when I do my massages. So the older generation, they feel and they gauge the difference as to what is the impact of that have left. But I really respect these women because they could be so quiet, but they're so dynamic. They have so many stories. For instance, the relationship we have with India started with these women who used to go in the summer and would buy something, and the COD, cash on delivery, they tell them, you go, and then when you go home, send us the money. To this day, this relationship is going on. So that means these women are really strong in terms of their economics. They can run the show and secure life for their children and raise them as well as anybody else in society.
So as an oral historian, I'm sure a lot of your interviews, I'm assuming, will be focused on older generations because that's more urgent, but I also know you interview younger generations. And between them, for instance, if you're among the different generations of women in the UAE, do you notice changes or different perceptions of women's condition or feminism here?
I asked my niece, I said, where do you see yourself? She said, sky the limit, khalo. But now, sky is the view, which means it's getting really, they're orbiting in places that we didn't foresee. And that's why I think when we enable them and give them the right tools, they go everywhere. Now, I didn't dare to even travel to go anywhere in their age. Now a group of girls will get together and take off and go on a holiday, some country, they explore, they make memory for themselves, they bring their children, they do, their life, they're defining it in a different way, but they're maintaining what they think based on their family setup is important. And education is one of them.
Okay. I would like to ask, since we only have a little bit of time, one common question for both Nighat and Aisha. I think one of the common elements among your practice is really trying to negotiate between the individual and the collective, and also the personal and the political. And you are constantly between that. And when we talk about women or women's rights or feminism, it is pretty much, if we say women, it will be almost 50% of the population. And while we share the common denominator of being women, there's a lot of differences even between us. It can be race, it can be religion, it can be socioeconomic status and class. And even in that situation, despite this sometimes more immense differences apart from gender, why do you think it's important that we still use the lens of feminism or see things through the women's conditions to talk about society?
Well, I would say feminism really cuts across and is necessary for everything. Feminism itself, by definition, should include caste, class, ethnic, and other oppressions. That if it doesn't if it doesn't, then to me it's not feminism. So any feminist would necessarily talk about all oppressions and would be their concerns. So I see no contradiction in that. And in fact, a feminist who only worries about class or only worries about one thing, her ethnicity, because sooner or later that will come in clash with the others, with two ethnicities, which has happened recently in Pakistan, where in Sindh, hardcore Sindhi feminists took the stand that the Pathans, the Pakhtuns, who were from Afghanistan, were asked to go back to Afghanistan by the government of Pakistan, at least the illegal immigrants. And they took the stand that all Pakhtuns should return, and they're spoiling Karachi and etc. And there was a big debate with some of us saying, they're born here. I mean, they have been here as refugees for 40 years. How could you just throw them out? So there was a debate on this. But they took the very ethnic line. And it does mean that those who take one, feminism means that when you build in ethnicity, etc., not that you're not mindful of it, not that you're not sympathetic, not that you're not supportive, etc., but if you actually identify. See, women have several identities. At what stage and under what circumstances is which part will be getting privileged? And that will happen in every movement of which part will be privileged, etc. And so it does in feminism as well. But feminism should actually be able to look at all oppressions and should confront all oppressions.
To me, I think the strength of our culture had negotiated the issue of feminism for us, where we don't feel these differences. We all gone through a collective memory where everybody bonds with the neighbor, bonds with the people in the neighborhood, bonds in the people in the collective as one. It's as if you're a Star Trekkie, you know what I mean, with the assimilate to the Borg. A Borg is a place where everybody have to assimilate to whatever value they have to coexist within it. What matters, I think, in the case of the UAE is humanity, because we have tolerance, we have people who look above and beyond, we have compassion, we have passion towards others, and I think that's what makes a difference. I've never felt my color in here. I felt it elsewhere when I lived elsewhere. It's not an issue. It had never been an issue, on the contrary. So that's what I mean. It's like women, race, and class. With all due respect, it's an issue. Yes, I'm not diminishing that, but all I'm saying is that the sample of us, the UAE, women's issue in the UAE had really gone a different path where we avoided all of this. And that's why the sky, I'm going to adopt this. Nobody is left behind. Everybody, we have to lift as we climb. And that's, to me, what is important for the future. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think we'll get questions from the audience. I see one here already.
Thank you. Thank you, Nighat and Aisha. Actually, I have a question for Nighat. We have the exhibition of Lala Rook in the round, and in the exhibition we have a video of the Nairobi Women's Conference. Can you tell us a little bit of what effect the Nairobi Women's Conference had on WAF as an organization?
Oh, enormously. I think not so much on WAF, because we weren't allowed to go out of the country. And some of us went. Lala, for instance, went to the States and came from there to Nairobi. I had to get a ticket from the Philippines and come that way. So there was a restriction. There were those NGOs that came with the government delegation. So we're not talking about those, but Women's Action Forum ones came on their own. It was very important, not so much as WAF, but very important to bring the South Asian women together. And the South Asian, we met each other for the first time, many of us for the first time, and there was a real camaraderie and friendship, etc., which not only grew, but which continued for the next 40 years. And that friendship was very important. It was there that we decided to have 1-month courses in women's studies taught by our own faculty, etc. And we had an important one in '86, in which Lala Rook did the screen printing. And she, so Lala was part of all that in many ways, making the posters, doing the photographs. She was very vast in terms of what she did, but very segmented. Like one would not come into the other. Most women that I talked to, her friends, I sort of said to one or two of them when they were filming me, saying that I'm not the artist, why are they doing you? Why am I'm the one talking about the art. But they said, you know her through all the stages. And that's why you know her art through the stages as well. But I don't think it made so much difference to WAF. But it definitely was the beginnings of a very tight, very political, very personal, very friendship-oriented relationship among South Asians.
Any other questions in the audience? I see the one there.
Yes, sir. I have a question or a comment to you. So it was a bit interesting for me to see that I think within the last 30, 40 years, nothing has changed much in Pakistan. Basically, when I listened to you today, I remembered the movie What People Will Say, a Norwegian movie I think I watched not too long time ago. So wondering, you don't have to answer, but it's an open question. What could be any kind of formula to make things progress in terms of women's rights in Pakistan? Because the movie basically was showing the same struggle like shown in the archive of the 1980s. And another question to Aisha is, I think you mentioned also about the younger generations. I'm particularly curious, what's your take on the Gen Z? Because I think till now, thanks to the gender equality, Emirati women have generally enjoyed a lot of freedom of expression and travel. But I think with all the means available in terms of social media, etc., and also maybe that now the UAE is even leading ways such as the metaverse strategy, I could imagine that young Emirati women are going to highly likely even disconnect them somehow from the traditional ways of being very connected to heritage. Thank you.
Well, I think that, I don't know the film that you're talking about, but I think women have made enormous strides, not because of Women's Action Forum necessarily, but it was a key organization. It has, if you saw, came to Pakistan in 1984, 85, or even earlier, 87, 88, you would see a lot of women with their heads covered. You would see a lot of art was banned for women, and not for women. Actually, the only art that was patronized was landscape and calligraphy. And none of the women artists, they signed a manifesto saying that they wouldn't get involved, and none of the women artists did. So the reason why what we tried to do is that we made posters of those paintings and got them around as posters. And every book, we had a publishing house, every book we had a cover using one of the artworks. So we got different ways of getting the art out, but there was state control. No theater was allowed, no dancing was allowed, no literature festivals were allowed, no biennales were allowed. I mean, nothing was allowed. So today, you will feel enormous amount of freedom for women. You'll have the media, you'll have social media, you'll have women at universities. At that time, there was a whole thing about having only women universities and colleges. So I think that the women have made great strides. The problems remain at so many other levels that you have to keep fighting. But I think that you're saying that they remain the same. That is not true. They remain the same, certainly, in the blasphemy law, but that's for everyone. They remain the same in Hudud law, which is for everyone. But they have changed in the zina law, which was the law of adultery. And they have changed in many other ways as well. I mean, the fact that women got the LGBT law to say self-definition was a major thing. I mean, there are very few countries that talk about self-definition and, being able to change that self-definition. So I would say a lot of things have changed. Very little, if you ask me, not little, but, major ones, but there's a long way to go. It's a long struggle.
Yes, they had introduced moral education in school from grade 1 to 12. In addition to that, we surrounded all the time by social and cultural activities that reconstruct the older community, and children can communicate with the older generation. Not far from where we are now in the heart of Sharjah, children can eat, the younger generation that is, they can eat the old food, they can interact with the older generation, they can listen to the old music. And this is all year round, because sometimes the activities in Sharjah, sometimes in Dubai, sometimes in Abu Dhabi, and they're always reminded of their culture and heritage through, they have maybe races in the boats, traditional boats. They have camel races. They have hunting using the falcons. So many activities are always reminding that generation of their heritage and their culture. And in the National Archive, we have a Young Historian Award encouraging them to participate and write their own history through maybe interviewing members of their families, or writing about a prominent figure, or going to the archaeologist sites and writing about something that will root them to the country and make them proud, and then give them the understanding of what's going on.
Thank you, everybody, for joining this conversation. I think we're already a bit over time. So, but if you have any questions, please, Nighat and Aisha will still be joining us for the evening so we can continue the conversation off stage. Thank you very much.